The upright row is definitely an overhated exercise. It's going to target both the upper traps and the side delts with a little bit of biceps involvement. I prefer to do these on cables with a rope because I can sweep the handles out as I row. As long as you have healthy shoulders, there's no evidence that they contribute to shoulder issues. I'm going to put these in B tier as a delt builder. They don't rank higher because, even with the cables, the upper traps will start to take over, so it's hard to get the delt fibers to true exhaustion. They're still a great overall yoke builder though, and I am a fan of upright rows. The reverse pec deck is an amazing rear delt exercise. It provides consistent tension throughout the range of motion, and because your chest is braced, you'll be directing all that tension coming from the stack into your rear delts. I actually prefer to do these sitting sideways because you'll get a much deeper stretch. But the downside is that you'll need to do each arm one at a time. That means it'll take a bit longer. You can superset each arm though, so while one side is working, the other side is resting, and you can just go back and forth without much rest in between. My instinct is to put these in A tier, but I think if you can lock in that sideways position, they deserve to be in S tier. The rope face pull will target the rear delts really well, especially if you set up the rope a little lower, take an underhand grip, and externally rotate your shoulders as you pull, kind of like doing a rear double biceps pose. My minor gripe though is that it's just really hard to get your mid traps to not take over. No matter what cues you use, your mid traps are going to be active. That's not necessarily a bad thing because you do want your mid back to grow as well, but then your rear delts might not be the limiting factor. I still think it's a great exercise to include since it'll give a big stretch on the rear delts, they feel good, and they're solid for overload. Rope face pulls are going in A tier for rear delt growth. Bent over reverse dumbbell flies have the same problem as dumbbell lateral raises. Zero tension at the bottom when the delts are stretched. I still think they're a good option if you don't have access to cables or if you're really time constrained. I actually still do them myself when I'm in a hurry. Oddly enough, my rear delts always get really sore from these too. They'd probably be in A tier, but because there's not quite enough tension in the stretch, I've got to knock them back to B tier. All right, the reverse cable crossover. Amazing stretch on your rear delts, especially if you cross your arms over at the top. Enormous range of motion with nice, even tension throughout the range. As long as you hold the cables themselves and not the handles, it should feel nice and smooth, and you shouldn't run into any clanging as your arms cross over. And then to avoid any left to right muscle imbalances, you can alternate which arm you cross over on top from set to set. As long as you focus on sweeping the cables out rather than yanking them back, you should feel a massive connection with your rear delts. These are amazing, and they're easily going into S tier. And that also makes them the third reveal behind door number 3 as my #1 rear delt builder. And if out of all these I had to pick one exercise as the worst of the worst, I guess it'd have to be the front raise, not because it's so bad for muscle growth, but rather because I think it's redundant in most cases. Still not bad enough to get into F tier though, because I do think it can have its place. And if I had to pick one exercise as the best of the best for overall shoulder development, I think I'd go with the cable lateral raise. It's easy to do, it's super effective, and it ticks all the boxes for hypertrophy.